So after the coup, the Donbass people, the people of Donbass, well, Odessa too, but the Odessa trade union house was burned alive, and that was enough to scare the people of Odessa. I'm sure not just that, but nonetheless, the Donbass people, they disagreed with the outcome of the coup because the Donbass and Crimea, well, Crimea is a separate topic, but Donbass and Crimea, they feel the most connection to Russia. So Crimea had a referendum, but we should talk about that separately, like in March, when it's 10 years of reunification, okay?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about Donbass, that the Donbass people started a rebellion against the regime, the Kiev regime, the Donbass rebels. And the rebellion was surely pro-Russian because Donbass people were with Russia. So, but at first Putin says, no, we are not going to accept you into Russia. You're part of Ukraine, but still, I'm sure, and I know Russia supported the rebels indirectly, supplied them with weapons, with volunteers, with maybe PMC Wagner was actually born in Donbass 2014. Yeah, but the Kiev regime committed.
There was Volunteer, Voluntorg, Northern Wind.
Yeah, Northern Wind. Yeah,
There was lots. But it goes back before. Yeah, it goes back after the Orange Revolution. Russian civil society organizations and NGOs from Russia began to promote self-defense networks of Donbass people. They began to promote. That's when the flag. They brought back the tricolor from the old city and state shield.
Mm-hmm.
The black, blue, and red. And this was like a movement that they actually began building in response to the first color revolution in Ukraine. Or in some ways the second, but we're talking, of course, about the Orange Revolution. Depending on whether you consider there's been 2 or 3 color revolutions in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it goes back then, and then, of course, when the so-called Revolution of Dignity, the color revolution in the Maidan.
Yeah.
The agenda, what people need to understand is, like, everyone in this region is educated about what's going on, and everyone understands what these people from the Pravi sector politics are talking about. Now, what people don't always appreciate, man, is that on USAID funded television, Radio Svoboda, Radio Liberty, on YouTube also, like on YouTube, USAID and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, they have these activists from Pravi sector talking as if they're just regular hipsters at a cafe. Oh, give me fucking frappuccino. Okay, yeah, here's my fucking my iPad, blah blah blah. It's crazy, right? So you would think that they were just like edgy, techie hipsters and stuff. But what are they talking about? Well, they're saying, well, of course we want the Donbass because of its wealth, but we don't want the people.
Yeah.
So we must eliminate the people, but keep the land.
Yeah.
So you know what that's genocide, right?
That's absolutely genocide.
That's genocide. So the project and program for genocide, right, from the Ukrainian coup government, right, was known. It was evident. People knew it going back to. I mean, people are aware of what Timoshenko had been saying. People are aware of what these people have been talking about for decades in Ukraine. So when this Maidan Revolution of Dignity, which that's the one that, Victoria Nolan brought cookies for, and $4 billion. And countless billions in black operations. We're just talking about above the surface congressional funds that we know about. This is, people understood that what had happened in Kiev, that what had happened there with that coup was a program and recipe for genocide. That this was what they had This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not what Russian propaganda was trying to scare people, that there's some secret agenda for genocide coming from this Kiev junta. No, this had been the normalized discourse. This had been the regular talked about stuff that these high profile activists, leaders in these movements, people who had been president or prime minister of Ukraine for years in the 2000s and 2010s. So when finally there was this very serious rupture with the past in 2014, people who are Russian speaking and actually more identify as ethnically Russian, which is a different category, because everyone speaks Russia in Ukraine unless they're pretending not to. But those ethnic Russians in the center, all the way, all of the regions, if you look at the Dnieper River, but then also Nikolaev and Odessa, people understood that this was being directed at them, that this was going to be, it's not just about, oh, we're not going to teach Russian in schools.
Yeah.
Right. This was, people rejected that there had been a coup.
Yes.
And it was unconstitutional.
Absolutely.
And so right. And so there's a doctrine, right? There's a doctrine that's understood around the world, right? About people and their right to determine based upon the next closest level of authority that is still legitimate. You see, so if you have illegitimate central authority that has broken the Constitution, that has violated, irretractably violated the rights of the people there, how can the people act legally, right, in the face of an illegal government, right? So all the actions that the people in Donetsk, in Lugansk, and attempted in Kharkov but failed, attempted in some other cities in Donetsk, like Mariupol, but failed, but other places succeeded, like in Lugansk, like in the cities of Lugansk, like in the cities of Donetsk, etc. These people came and they didn't seize power. They didn't execute the mayor. There wasn't a kicking down doors. They peacefully assembled. They went far and wide and deep into the people. They held democratic referendums that were closely observed by international people, journalists from all over the world, who since then Atlantic Council media outlets, which is all of them in the West, have been trying to denounce not only those referendums as false, but international journalists who went to go observe those, they called them, Russian agents or something. So it's just this entire conspiracy theory that everyone that is going to be involved in this is somehow has a nefarious, deceitful angle, right?
Yeah.
So, so the next level of authority is the local or state or oblast government. And they weren't breaking with the Constitution of Ukraine. They were trying to maintain and uphold the existing Constitution of Ukraine. But the format that takes is going to be independence from the illegal government in Kiev.
Yes.
Okay. After the ATO is unleashed.
Yeah.
And after thousands of civilians are being killed. This is like what triggers the response from the Russian Federation to really get, okay, this direction of this, let's do the Minsk agreement, but then that doesn't work. And the Minsk agreement also would have kept those regions in Ukraine, ultimately.
Yeah, and
they would have had a special status, but they would have been part of Ukraine.
And they have the temerity, they have the Kiev authority had the nerve to call it an anti-terrorist separation, like people defending themselves, the people of Donbass, the Russian-speaking people of Donbass who defend themselves against genocide are somehow terrorists. Just
the people are the terrorists.
Basically. Yeah, the people just it pisses me off so much, bro. That's why when I heard this stuff when I learned about it, I fully supported the Donbass republics, and I said I was on many Russian forums. I said, why don't we we don't send the troops, but why we didn't recognize the republics in the first place in 2015? Why only in 2022? I guess there were economic motives, but still, I was with all of from the bottom of my heart, I supported the republics. I was so pissed off at the Kiev regime, and back then I used to think that Putin isn't doing enough. Well, now I
Yeah,
am
that's what
wiser.
that. Yeah,
So now I'm wiser, and I understood that back then Russia wouldn't have do much, because back then we were too dependent on the West economically, even in the food department. Well, but then the West imposed sanctions on us, sanctions that were supposed to just destroy, annihilate our economy. And then Barack Obama said that Russia is a regional power. And then in 2015, he said Russia is isolated with economy in tatters. I remember that speech. I believe it was a State of the Union speech of Barack Obama,
yeah.
2015. Yeah, and he said, "Oh, Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters," but the Russian economy wasn't in tatters. Yes, it did have some problems, like the dollar, the oil prices, and the ruble contraction. But the
You're
Russian people,
talking about the 2015 and 16.
yes, yes, I'm
Yeah,
talking.
I remember there was a crash of the ruble, but it only
Yeah,
lasted like 5 days or
yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah,
But this what the thing is that what you're talking about,
yeah.
raises very big, deeper questions about what is really going on, Yuri. And like
Hmm.
one of the things that people need to consider is that the United States, um,
Hmm.
in their policies against Russia,
Hmm.
so obviously improve Russia's long-term economic position,
Yes.
that we have to consider if there's something else deeper going on, very much like World War II, where the US and the Russians were allies.
Hmm.
You have to look at, but remember that the US, up until pretty much the Poland,
Hmm.
pretty much until 1939
Hmm.
or so, the United States had been backing the Nazis, not just directly, but every major American company,
Hmm.
Ford, IBM, Coca-Cola, I mean, all of them, like
Oh,
every
and many
consumer good,
European.
every manufacturing, were invested in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and many
Like it,
European companies
and many European companies,
like
but we would
Nestle.
expect that. But the point is that how powerful the United States is in
Mhm,
the aftermath of World War One, because
mhm.
they were untouched by World War One. Europe
Yeah,
was destroyed halfway,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
then again totally. So the United States has a tremendous power at this time, even, and before World War II, they weren't able to like send the Marines anywhere and do anything they wanted. But
Mhm,
after World War II, they could. But before World War II, the United States entering the war, whichever side, the United States was powerful enough to be the deciding factor in a war. And
mhm,
so what was done is that the United States in the conflict joined
mhm,
with the Russians against their allies, against the Nazis. The Nazis were American allies. That's who the
mhm,
American allies were
mhm,
throughout the 30s. So yes, there had been the Anglo-Soviet Trade Pact between the UK and the Soviet Union in 1927. This was in exchange for productive technologies and technique and steel, and exchange for wheat.
mhm,
But then this we're talking about refined steel, even though a lot of the raw materials are coming from
mhm,
Russia. So similar to the relationship that Iran had with the Seven Sisters and the
mhm,
British. So but even during this time under Stalin, there was a relationship economically between the
mhm,
UK and the US and the
mhm,
Soviet Union. People might know about Armand Hammer and Western investors into the early Bolshevik government
mhm,
who saw beyond the politics of Marxism, communism. They're like, okay, here's the investment opportunity. Here's
mhm,
the thing, right? This is where the money's at. This is basically a
mhm,
hedge. It's a very big investment because other people wouldn't do it because they're
mhm,
they're ideological. They think, oh, you can't make deals with communists because they just
mhm.
take everything. No, you can make deals with communists and make a lot of money, in fact, because no
Mhm.
one else is. So there's your hedge right there. So it's wonderful. But nevertheless, the main thrust of investment, of Anglo-Saxon investment, was with the Nazis, with the, I mean, you had the family of the present monarchy back in the 30s in on their cricket courses and playing around. They were, sig hailing, and they loved Hitler. The royal family loved Hitler.
Oh yeah,
And
I
they
saw the
considered
picture
him,
of Queen Elizabeth, like Zig heiling, or should I say Higgs
right.
heiling? Yeah.
Yes, yes, and all of her cousins and all of them. So it's a very strange history when people kind of dig in. So I just implore people to consider that it is so obvious that these sanctions were going to strengthen Russia, were going to allow politically Putin to exert further control over the oligarchy and transform them into tycoons, that it's like so crystal clear, the direct unilinear one-to-one relationship of those events, that you'd have to have a liberal criticism of power in which you think that the elites are stupid or just bumbling from one era to the next to think that this isn't planned. And once you understand that it is far more likely, Yuri, that this was planned as opposed to just the blundering buffoonery of the leaders of the most powerful country in the world at the time, it's more relevant to think in terms of like, what's the position of Europe and what is really going on. And what I've been trying to explain through my live streams and over and over, and many different angles of exploring this, is that this conflict against Russia is actually two things. It's a genocide against Russian people wearing Ukrainian uniforms, number one. It's a genocide against Russian people, but the Russians being genocided are ones with Ukrainian passports, number one, primarily. I'm not talking about the 20, 30, 40, 50,000 civilians in the Donbass over the past 10 years that have been shelled. That's what the Kiev junta thinks the genocide is. But the US understands the genocide is against future Russian citizens. You see, everyone knew that Russia is going to take Ukraine. Legitimately, illegitimately, militarily, diplomatically, economically, doesn't matter. Russia has like 4, 5, 6, 7 cards to play getting Ukraine. There was no way that Russia is not going to get Ukraine, period.
Yeah.
So there's only two options then for the West. Let them have it, or let them have it in ruins. So the West went with let them have it in ruins. You understand the difference?
Yes, yes.
So this is the most important way to understand this conflict, that the West always knew that Ukraine goes to Russia, but they have transformed Ukraine, a country that had almost 50 million people at one point in time, 47, then it went to 39. Now they have 21 million people. Human beings are valuable.
Yes.
Work is valuable. Labor is necessary. So now Russia is going to get Ukraine, and they're going to get as much of Ukraine as they want or need. I don't know how much exactly that is, but there's no limit to Russia's
Neither do
need.
I.
There's no limit to Russia's practicality. It's all based on what Russia needs. I don't know what that's going to be, but it's going to be as much as they want, is the truth. And all those people in there are going to be much happier as Russian citizens than they were as Ukrainian citizens, but not if they're fucking dead. So that has been the point of the US, is to kill off as many Ukrainians and to destroy as much Ukrainian industry and infrastructure as possible, so that the eventuality is much more expensive for Russia than it would be otherwise. Knowing that, then the other part of that is look at the ruin that it's caused for Europe. So the US has been sabotaging Europe, right? Germany is no longer competitive. They're paying 1.7 times the median cost of energy of any other G7 country. You can't be competitive if your energy costs are 170% compared to your competitors.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So this has actually destroyed the German economy. Scholz knows it. Scholz knows this is unsustainable. Industrial business interests, people that keep the lights on, even the service economy, is like, we cannot do this. Well, you can build back better. Well, you can work from home. Well, people take cold showers. Oh, turn off the heat in the daytime. It's like, okay, so are we getting better? Is this what an economy is? We go back to the dark ages to survive. Like this is not progress by the Western model. So they're tripping over their own promises about what's
Yeah.
possible and what's good. So that's the most important takeaway, Yuri, about sanctions, about the war, is that the West strengthened Russia. They did it, and it must have been on purpose. It must have been on purpose to strengthen Russia, to put it in the position where it would be impossible for Europe to inflict any damage. And also Russia becomes a little bit more independent from China in that process too, in small degrees, just because of the things that Russia had to industrialize, right? And bring back production to Russia. That doesn't mean that China's a problem or China's a secret enemy or anything like that. We're just talking about economics that and industrialization. Like there are now Russian people involved in assembly of things that they used to either import from the US or import from China. So there's many weird things that have happened on many different levels. And it's very clear that the most direct benefit to the US has been its ability to reassert control over the value of the euro and to reassert control over the cost of energy through sanctions and access to goods, and also to try to make Germany dependent on Polish refineries for energy. But these are Polish refineries that are designed that are only compatible with the fracking energy from the US. Okay, so it's a much more expensive energy, but then Poland is in control of it. So now, if imagine if Poland is going to go into the Russian direction at some point, well, now Germany doesn't want to be in another situation like they were with Nord Stream if you have the wrong type of thinking and power in Germany. So then you're going to have, if the US can affect more burden shifting and burden sharing of the war effort onto Europe, much of that burden has been through the sanctions and the cost of energy. You know, the Europeans should consider their donation to the war the difference in their negative economy. If they want to say, oh, you have to give 50 billion to Ukraine. Okay, how much should we lose from sanctions? Okay, there's our fucking 50 billion. There's our 200 billion fucker right there. And Germany's getting in that direction. How do we know that? Well, because they've been backing out of the commitments they've been making. They've been saying, hey, we promised money, but we also gave a lot of tanks and weapons for free. Now we're going back. This is what Germany's doing now. Now we're going back and calculating how much that stuff is actually worth to us that we gave for free. And we're subtracting the replacement cost, not the value at time, but the replacement cost. We are saying that's our gift to Ukraine. So Germany's backing out. The US obviously already backed out. If Europe stays on this collision course, there's going to be political revolutions in Europe. They're going to go down. And if there's still sanctions against Russia, all these collapsing quasi-independent, because of the different private banks that are nevertheless connected through the ECB, et cetera, in terms of euro emissions, interest rates, et cetera. But when you look at the parts of the European economy in vectors of the service economy and in industry that are unrelated to financial services, that they have a very bad relationship with New York and City of London. And they're like, this doesn't work out for us at all economically. We're going bankrupt. So then who comes in? Well, you have consortiums out of City of London, Wall Street, New York again, that are now building up and they're buying out these failing German companies, which is now a transfer of wealth and power from Berlin and Paris back to London and New York. So there's a real other war going on between the Anglo-Saxons and the Franco-Germans. And the Franco-Germans are the ones. The Franco-Germans are the ones that are getting hit way more. It's not Russia that's suffering right now. It's the Franco-Germans are suffering the most. And if that's what's happening, then look at what was planned to be. Because again, we have to get away from this liberal criticism of power, that all these things are just markets and chaos and stupidity and bad planning and arrogance and hubris. Like those are all very nice propaganda themes, but it's not reality. Like the people in charge of the West at the very, very top, well, yes, paradigmatically in terms of paradigm shifts, in terms of these things, yes, they've lived partly, mostly in the past, but they're brilliant people that can understand long-term geopolitics, heartland, rimland, dependencies, core, peripheral. We understand this. It is in our literature. Like we learn this in school at the, at the upper level. So that's where policy formation is coming out of in the United States. People who went to Harvard, the John Kennedy School of Public Relations, et cetera, Yale, and to the extent that 1 out of 100 people in those schools actually is paying attention, the other kids who get A's are just, their parents are giving buildings to the school and their kids, pass with flying colors. But the 1 out of 100 students in those schools, many of them are the ones that are on academic scholarship that really come from the middle class, are the ones that are really the brains that have, like the Kissingers and the Brzezinskis and stuff like that of today who are born in the US, actually understand this stuff. They actually understand that Europe is the sick man, Europe is the weakest link, Europe is the lowest hanging fruit, Europe doesn't have an army, Europe is mostly halfway politically controlled by the US, so let's take over the rest of it. So that's the real thing going on here. Like, in terms of the genocide is criminal, and that was against Russians wearing Ukrainian uniforms. Very few Russians have died in this altogether compared to the number of Ukrainians that have died. But when you understand that those Ukrainians are really Russians, when you understand that Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell and John McCain and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright and Victoria Nuland and Kagan and all these neocons, they understand that Ukrainians are Russians. They understand that eventually Ukraine is going to be part of Russia. So let's destroy it and depopulate it and make a genocide of Ukrainians now that they think that they're on our side. Like they think that we are on their side. And we're just marching them forward into meat grinders after meat grinders. Well, boom, Russia has to hit at 3 o'clock in the morning so no one gets hurt. The energy system, the this, the that, the roads, the bridges, the infrastructure, or when they go into fight over a city, whether it's Mariupol or Bakhmut or Avdiivka, like this winds up in ruins through the fighting. Right now, Russia has a commitment, and you can see what's been happening. Every single family that was registered in the cadastre of living in every place is having their apartment rebuilt at the cost of the Russian state, and they're adding even 10 and 15 square feet or square meters to these apartments, so they're better than they were before. They're brand new, and they're giving these back to the people that owned the original places. Who are the people that were displaced when the fighting began? And in addition to that, many people who had been living in Mariupol, been living in places that were controlled by Pravi sector after 2015. Those people had long left because politically they were for a long time secretly scaring individuals away and moving in their friends into their apartments. So there had been a low-level kind of first-person shooter version of ethnic cleansing at the community level going on for the past decade through all of the parts of the Donbass or Novorossiya that were occupied by the ATO forces. And those people fled for any number of Russia, they fled for Turkey, they fled for Poland, they fled for Germany. It doesn't have anything to do with their political allegiances, has everything to do with where they could, find a place to move. But who wants to live next to fucking Azov? And Azov is saying, oh, you guys are on the SBU data list because of WhatsApp and Facebook. We know that you are part of chats that support Russia. So now you have to fucking leave your house. And then some soldiers, it's called quartering. When a hostile occupying army takes over the living places of the civilians. So the Nazi volunteer brigades have been quartering themselves in Russian homes throughout the Donbass for 12 years. So that's another big, or 10 years, that's another big part of this. So
okay, Joaquin, I think we've done.
Brother, thanks for having me on here. I have to actually hit stop right now. You can give the outro. Peace and love to you, brother. It's been real. I'm out.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.